Good evening, everyone. My name is Sam, and on behalf of Booksoup, I'd like to thank everyone for joining us for our next event with Felicia Luna Lemus and Lynell George discussing their new releases, Particulate Matter, and A Handful of Earth, A Handful of Sky, The World of Octavia E. Butler. We'll be hosting more virtual events in the near future, and you can learn more about them by signing up for our email newsletter on our website, as well as following us on social media at Booksoup, and you can even follow us here on Crowdcast to get direct emails from us when we're going live. And past events are also available on our YouTube channel, and this one will be as well, so I will share a link to that. Our next event is scheduled for this coming Monday, same time at 6 p.m. with Scott O'Connor in conversation with Maria Hummel to discuss his new book, Zero Zone. Tonight's event will end with a Q&A, and to submit a question, please use the Ask a Question button at the bottom of the screen. It's right next to the chat area to the left. And if you see a question on the list that you'd like for our speakers to answer, please click the like button. It will bump it up in the queue. And I'm sure we'll get to them anyway, but if you're really excited about one and you want to make sure we answer it, you can do that. And we will answer as many questions as time will allow. Also, please support Booksoup and our authors by purchasing a copy of tonight's featured books, which you can do by clicking the green button below. It will actually take you to our event page, but both of books are listed at the bottom, so you'll be able to easily add both of them to your cart. And if you do that during the event, it will not interrupt the viewing, so you can do that at any time. And with that said, let me introduce our guest speakers for this evening. Lynell George is a journalist and essayist. She is the author of 3 books of nonfiction: No Crystal Stair, African Americans in the City of Angels, After Image Los Angeles Outside the Frame, and her latest, A Handful of Earth, A Handful of Sky, The World of Octavia E. Butler. A former staff writer for both the LA Times and LA Weekly, she covered social issues, human behavior, visual arts, music, and literature. She taught journalism at Loyola Marymount University in Los Angeles. In 2013, was named a USC Annenberg Getty Arts Journalism Fellow, and in 2017 received the Huntington Library's Alan Jitsi Fellowship for her studies of California writer Octavia Butler. Her commentary has also been featured in numerous news and feature outlets, including Boom, A Journal of California, Smithsonian KCET Artbound, KPCC The Frame, LA Review of Books, Vibe, Chicago Tribune, Washington Post, Essence, and more. Her liner notes for Otis Redding Live at the Whiskey A Go-Go earned a 2018 Grammy Award. Thank you so much for joining us again, Lynell. We're so happy to have you. This is where everyone would clap in the store.
That's right. We'll do the beat. Thank you.
And our other special guest tonight, Felicia Luna Lemus, is the author of Particulate Matter and the novels Trace Elements of Random Tea Parties and Like Sun. Her writing has been anthologized in numerous collections and has appeared in publications including Bomb, The Believer, ZYZZYVA, and the California Sunday Magazine. Lemus is currently the visiting writer at Pitzer College. Sharpie ultra-fine black markers and crossword puzzles are among her favorite things. Typical writer, that's good. And she lives in Los Angeles with her spouse and their wild one. And without further ado, because I know you're all wanting to hear from them, not me, I'm going to turn the camera over to our guests this evening. Please sit back, relax, and enjoy the presentation. Thank you both so much for being with us tonight.
Thank you. Thank you for having us. I'm so excited to be here.
I'm super excited too. Thank you, Booksoup. Thank you, Lynell, for being here and for doing this event. I'm so delighted for this. Thank you.
Thank you, and thank you all for being out there, taking a break with us. And thank you, Booksoup, as always, for hosting. It's great, even though we're in a virtual mode. I'm so glad we can be together. It really matters. It really matters.
I agree. And I just want to, if you can indulge me for just a second, I want to say a special thank you. I saw that Johnny Temple, my publisher, Jennifer Gilmore, who published the very first part of this project that I'm going to be reading from tonight. Thank you for being here tonight. And thank you to everyone else too. So thank you.
Yeah. Hey, Jennifer, and hey, Johnny.
So, Lynell, should I go ahead and just read a bit,
or why don't you want to start?
Is there anything else that you'd like to start with?
No, I guess we can just jump in.
Oh, okay,
right.
Sounds great. Okay, fantastic.
Okay.
All right. Well, I'm going to be reading tonight, obviously, from my new book, Particulate Matter. I'm going to be reading 2 sections. So I'll be reading a little bit from the beginning and also a tiny bit from later on in the book. And they're both really short readings. So it's short sections. It'll go quickly, I think. All right, here we go. Is my sound okay? You can hear me?
I can
right?
hear you. We're getting a little bit of a lag, but
okay.
We can hear you.
Okay. Hopefully it'll go through clearly. All right. Today is the longest day. Sun blazing, heavy, thick, solid air. Purple mountains disappeared. Downtown skyscrapers muted twinkle. Observatory, a dull smudge out west. It feels like my lungs are sunburned, you say. We speed toward fluorescent lights and bleached floors and automatic sliding glass doors that open too goddamn slow. Again. My father's first wife died in a car accident at his side, pregnant with the child I once, when I was a child myself, thought was the first me. When my father died 23 years later, he left me his first wife's wedding rings. You are the age he was when he died. I pushed this thought from my mind. The rings are jade and gold. They fit me perfectly. A lightning bolt killed my great-grandfather. We are far from those rural fields now, one country north and in a city bigger than he ever saw. Doesn't matter. It was naive of me to think the skies could be neutral. Hummingbird nest at our front gate, hair of the dog, a few of mine too, silver. Delicate twigs, tiny crawling rose leaves, and a bit of white thread, tangled into the most beautiful little nest. I put the nest in a Ziploc to freeze it, to sterilize it, quoth my mother. All things die in the freezer. Her collection of exquisite oddities stored beside ice cube trays, to keep it on my desk. Then the whole thing makes me sad, that empty fallen nest. I should put it back where I found it, but it's mine now. Car full of the things you need. I drive the long drive to the shore, to the little house, home, not home, your new temporary, I pray, residence, the place where you can breathe, literally. I fold the hanging towels, mop the bathroom floor, rinse the tub, square the corners of every bottle and tube on the counters, gather empty dry cleaner wire hangers and throw them in the blue bin. I don't even know if this town recycles like at home, our real home, home. Everything in its place, you are not. And this next section is after there was a necessary move. So it's experiences in a new neighborhood, a different part of Los Angeles. And a very different place than what we had considered home. So read a couple of these sections. The woman at the register in the fancy house stuff store in the new temporary neighborhood makes me open the trash can I buy for home, not home, to prove I haven't tried to steal anything. She does this with a pleased smile. Now, there's nothing inside that, right? She says. I smile, my best dead eye, kill you with kindness smile. Likely the second smile I ever learned, right after genuine joy. Of course not. See, I say. The young woman at Starbucks in the new temporary neighborhood asks for my name and then says, oh, you're gonna have to spell that one for me. Her smile coded, like I'm beginning to realize might be standard issue here. Her marker and dirty cash register fingers touch the lip of my cup. Sure, no problem, I say, my second best smile. F, as in, do not try me. E, as in, Eugene, my father, great-grandson of the ambassador of exports to the King of Sweden, Flemish on his other side, and in the surname that once was my hyphenate. L, as in Luna, family name of my native blood, name of the moon in the sky. I, as in indigenous, Chichimeca, nomadic, here now and always. You will not lord over me. This land is not yours. You cannot steal what cannot be owned. C, as in, I will not say it. I will not repeat myself. A, as in, my God, just give me the cup of tea already. Chicanery. Indian giver. Going Dutch. Gypped. For one stupid moment in time long ago, I thought we'd gotten post all of this, all of us. Don't they have an app for that? That's it. Thank you.
And I'm just going to say this now before I read the irony. I mean, the coincidence of this, that I have two questions about those two sections that you read. We did not plan this. We're just in sync. We're just in sync. Thank you for that. And I do want to just comment before just sailing into mine, because this book really affected me, because you are moving through all of these different landscapes. There's physical landscape, which we'll talk about, and there's emotional landscape. And in a region as uncertain and changeable as this one is, you're able to do all of this with such spare language. And I just was knocked out by it. And then, of course, in the days after I read the book the second time, whenever I would turn on the radio and I would hear, when we were having the fires, and I would hear the phrase particulate matter, you know, I would think about you and what we're kind of moving through, and what lands. Some of it we can see, and some of it we can't. Some of it we can't see, and it just seeps in. And to me, that is so much about home, and what, you know, and part of what being, you know, calling ourselves Angelino is too. You know, what we walk those lands, those different landscapes we navigate. So thank you.
Thank you, Lynell. Thank you. I'm so honored to hear that from you. Thank you. Thank you.
I wanted to read a little bit. I wanted to try to do something that would connect with your reading in your book. My book, A Handful of Earth, A Handful of Sky, The World of Octavia Butler, isn't a biography per se, and it's but it does look at her life, and it looks at the objects in her life that she used as tools to create herself. And she, Southern California native, who figured out how to move through the region. She didn't drive. But she got all over the place, and she used this place as a backdrop in several of her books. But the backdrop part was going back to what your work is to me. It's about absorbing, you know, sense of place and your place in that place. So I'm going to read a section from a chapter called A Human Notebook. She used to take a bus from Pasadena to the Central Library downtown. That was one of her favorite places to go. I was telling someone today on Twitter, it was her palace. It literally was her palace. It was a school. It was her, for her, it was her advanced degree. It was her office to go to. It was a place where she knew people, and it was the place where she found herself. So I'm going to start with the bus. Don't you need a car in LA? She hears this less as a question, but more as a maxim at many turns for many years, decades. Her answer is her example, her maps, her passes, her timetables. She will smash this notion about Los Angeles. Each bus she boards, each long walk she takes, each interaction she participates in, that becomes fodder for a story, cracks open into an inquiry. It slows the city down to moments and voices, questions and answers, theories to delve into. She is not always a fan of Los Angeles in the abstract. It tires and exasperates her, but it has offered an abundance. The city itself is a story, a seed. All eyes on its telegenic contours, as well as its disarray. The city transmits its of the moment status to the world. Shifts in neighborhood population, consequential clashes, weather changes, racial discord, housing crises, and Octavia's fertile writer's mind always leaps into the what if? What if this goes on? It will, she chastens herself, and it won't. Societies repeat patterns of behavior, but not exactly and not necessarily when or where expected. Another puzzle to work through. She has her ear tuned to the ground, but what she often considers to be more revealing is locking into a frequency that electrifies the air. What swirls above us that we cannot see? Then she teases out possibility, spinning out as far as it might go. Write descriptions, poetry, feelings. Write what's outside, other people. Take it all up. Take it all in. Write it down. It's okay to write anything, everything. Her mind is always working, clicking, digesting, assimilating the colors of light in a smog-scrimmed sunset, the ache of an adjacent broken heart, the weight and grace of empathy, the pattern of a voice speaking in anger or whispering in seduction. How to replicate that on the page? Don't just listen. Hear, jot it down in the moment. How to make that immediate and palpable from the distance of a reach across the country or a galaxy, or from the distance of 200 years, forward or backward. How to make love timeless, fear immediate and urgent. Stories drift past at the bus stop, at the airport, while sitting waiting for the movie to begin. She's a human notebook. Stories drift past at the bus stop. 3:24:92. All is still falling, but almost done. Camphor fruit, round, purple, black. Smooth berries, soft, and mashing on concrete. With so much to take in, you can't always trust the sharpness or the odd and unique contours to memory. So her rules for herself and for others later, other future dreaming writers, are quick and to the point. Don't leave home without your notebook, paper scraps, something to write with. Don't walk into the world without your eyes and ears focused and open. Don't make excuses about what you don't have or what you would do if you did. Use that energy to find a way, make a way. As a writer dreaming futures, alternative landscapes, and parallel paths, what pieces of the here and now might you need? A handful of earth and a handful of sky. Root your speculations in the textures of the here and now. Octavia moves through space as if a sponge. She asks questions of others, but mostly of herself. Before work, on morning walks, sometimes just after the sun lifts, she can suss out the fine details of her surroundings. It's just her and the quiet. Her morning trek is often due north, up the steep grade above the 210 freeway, toward the movie backdrop hills, the San Gabriels that see snow in the winter. There's enough light to make necessary measurements and comparisons from last year to this, from last month until now. They are a measure of how the earth is changing. Our fodder for imagination, the details needed for a text she's tackling. The world is trying to catch her eye. It's trying to speak to her. It's also trying to speak through her. Octavia knows that that is imperative. It is imperative to be still, to pay attention. The earth is telling her what ails it and what it has had enough of, how it might crack and shatter. And Octavia is making connections. She scours the newspaper, clips science studies, and keeps stacks of statistics. These all connect to the observations she's recording in her notebooks, the hunting and gathering of natural ideas, so she can organize and articulate what's necessary, not to scare us, but to prepare us. Pay attention, pay strict attention. Do not miss a thing.
Oh, Lynell, I love your language. Oh, such a treat, such a treat. And I will tell you this, I think someone had told you I'm being very greedy with this and not letting anyone get this out of my grip. I've been just, such
Yes, it's
a
been taken
pleasure.
out of the library.
It's such an amazing book. And the section that you just read right now too, I think it's the part that starts out with this kind of observation of how a writer uses everything,
Yes.
right? This idea. And I love the way that you bring that to life in terms of how she travels through the city and every detail, like on her walk, seeing how the fruit is changing throughout the seasons. And it's incredible. And I mean, one of the really beautiful things about your book too is all of the materials that you have from the archive of all these, just like the ephemera, all these just like scraps of paper and bus schedules and just all of it. Like she kept all of it. Like it was just, it's amazing to see and so powerful. I mean, such evidence of like how she was always paying attention to every detail.
Right. It was important. I mean, it's like she was keeping a record of here and us, and it was important for her to keep a record of herself, so as well. And I mean, it's amazing, there's so many drafts and early thoughts, and that's the thing about the archive. It's at the Huntington Library. There are more than 350 boxes of material, and it's just a range of things. And so when I first went in, I was overwhelmed. I mean, the finding aid, where you fill out now you fill out this way, not like she did. Your request, it's this thick, it's a big binder. And that, even looking at the finding aid on my in a PDF form, it's just page after page after page. So it was overwhelming, and I thought, evidence of where she'd been, evidence of the work, of all the work it took for her to be. So for you, though, I was thinking, I see parallels of that looking, and that absorbing, and that being a sponge. And I didn't get a chance to click onto the piece today, but there was a line about, I guess this is the Publisher's Weekly piece about your book. Mm-hmm. One of the things that really struck me about this book, it feels genreless, and my book is sort of genreless too. And it could be this, it's a little bit of that, but it's very, very deliberate, and feels like a diary, it feels like a poem, it feels like a word painting, it feels like we're looking over your shoulder, but more than that, it feels like we're peering into your heart. how did this take form? Were you working on this, or was it one of those things where you were writing something and then it kind of took over and found its form? I was really curious about the seeds of this.
Well, it's funny to have read this book, your book, and to know so much about Octavia Butler's process and all of the things that she held on to. Because I've often joked that one of my best friends is my shredder. I often feel like it's a very cathartic thing to really let go of things. I love shredding things.
Yeah.
So I started to think, oh my gosh, what am I doing? But then I realized, part of how this book came about, and I wonder if there are some parallels with her experience too, is that it was a very difficult, traumatic moment in my marriage and my life. Everything felt out of control, upside down.
Mm-hmm.
This was in 2017. It's like we're in a different kind of version of that right now,
Right,
as a nation, I think. But just personally, in my personal experience, that's how I felt at that moment. And I just started noting things around me. Like that was very grounding to me. It was very, it made the world feel solid again when things were so, it just felt like vapor. And I was so exhausted, and it I think it helped keep things, if not in perspective, just grounded in some way, and which I desperately needed. And it's like, I wonder, the whole thing with Octavia Butler, it's like, I remember reading in your book that her family came here during the Great Migration. And there's this beautiful, I don't want to paraphrase it too much, but this whole idea that you had of that her family came here in the Great Migration, seeking better opportunities. And then the way you phrase it is, she would continue their journey, pushing further than they could see. Like she's this world creating that she does, but it seems like there's something in the trajectory there of it kind of maybe it has some sort of origins in this displacement. And I feel like there may be something similar there in terms of, I felt like the world had been ripped out from under my feet in a very immediate way. And it just brought to the surface all of these issues that are always around us in society, in terms of race, and for me, queerness and all this other stuff. But it's just like, it pushed it all to the foreground. And then on top of it all, the fact that what was the root of the situation that I was dealing with was that it was caused by air pollution and chemical, environmental pollution. It's like, so there's something, I don't know, there's something there of like trying to see the world around you very clearly and with such specificity, but also maybe trying to weave a path forward in some way. That I felt that when I was reading your book about her process of creating self and creating world, and how that's a very empowering thing.
Right. You have no power. Right. Exactly. And that was her. And she talked about, she was, I started telling stories to myself, making them up in my head when I was 4 years old, and she would memorize these stories. And then she started to forget the stories, and she would tell them to her mother, like during the day, and she would just rattle her stories. And then she realized, she was forgetting some of the details of her story and all the work she was doing. And, and so she started to write them down. And later, though, she understood that it was by making herself the star of that story, of those stories, giving herself power in the stories, it was a way of her being able to deal with the disregard that she felt in the world. And you see it, when you're looking at her diaries, and she's really struggling in school, and she's embarrassed. She goes to stand up in front of class, and she just totally just has a meltdown and comes home, and she talks about like how she almost cried in front of class, and the kids they couldn't figure her out, and the teachers couldn't figure her out. And so she just climbed inside of herself, and that's where she found space, so writing. And the fiction started on the page at 10 and 11, and books, too. Were you a big reader?
Oh
growing
yeah.
up?
I mean, all the information about, how she loved the library, that was my safe space as a kid,
Yeah.
was the
Yeah.
library.
Yeah.
And yet the funny thing, I mean, there's no, I'm not in any way suggesting that there are direct equivalencies, because these are very different legacies and heritages that we have in terms of our nation and the history of slavery. And it's just that no way am I saying it's an equivalent situation. And at the same time, I remember in the city of Orange, where I grew up in Orange County, I was such an avid reader that I would win the summer reading contest every summer. And they had all kinds of fun little prizes that we could get bookmarks, and
Did you get
like
a trophy?
and then we got gift certificates for hamburgers, fun stuff like that. But it was really, it felt very special to me, because that was one of my strengths, was being a reader, and it felt like I was being recognized for something I was good at. So it was special. But I very specifically remember the librarian one time suggesting that I hadn't actually read the books that I had read. I had this huge, same thing, like these huge stacks of books,
Right.
that were just like world opening for me. And I remember her opening one book after another, flipping to random pages and quizzing me, and saying, oh, so then what happens after such and such? And I, of course, remembered all of it, because I loved reading. But there's just, it's very interesting, like the things that are spaces of power, the ways that, like, Octavia Butler had to constantly push back against all of these obstacles that were put in her path.
Right.
And I don't know. I think maybe related. There's this interesting thing that you explore in the book about how she is so focused on creating a distinction between who, let's see, is it Estelle? Yeah,
Yes.
Estelle, right? Estelle versus Octavia. And who one is going to be the public persona.
Right.
This creation of self, right?
Yep.
As an artist, as
Exactly.
I mean, the way, I think you mentioned her notebook at one point, like that was her shield almost at times, right? And I almost envisioned the books being the same, but she was always bracing herself against the world with these shields.
Exactly.
And so, but I feel like that creation of self was yet another layer of that.
It was. And it was a way for her to, and once she kind of hooked on that, she realized that she could put Estelle away, and Estelle would kind of creep up sometimes, but she even started to visualize in a way, like, this is the way Octavia would dress, and this, rather than the way that Estelle would dress, this is the way she will hold herself. This is the way. I love one of the lines. She goes, Octavia will wear high heels, so she's 6 feet tall, but she's going to put on some high heels because Octavia will do this, not Estelle. And it's, again, a way to shield, that tender Estelle, but Estelle pops up, throughout the rest of her life. And we do all these things, this sort of, as we move through. And that's the thing, back to, your book and the emotional weather. Like I was thinking about, this idea of moving through space too. And I love the distinction of home, not home, and the real home. And these places that we have to create for reasons of comfort. And we have to have a cocoon, to climb into, because it gets rough out there. That scene with the coffee, I've had versions of that too, where what's going on, and there's this list of microaggressions, and you are just, shield goes up. And I love the detail in another sequence where you're talking about, you realize that your sunglasses aren't opaque. So whatever you're processing, whatever some fool did to you, like the second ago, they shot of it, But this idea that we have to hold on to so much as we move through. And I was also struck by, this is a really meandering way to get to what I want to say, but I was struck by the region's complexities and these minefields we do move through in our lives. And this trek you make from one side of town, where home is, to not home. And I think about the freeways are like, it's linked together by 3 ways that you have to travel. And And these roads are these conjunctions that like link us together. And you get off into this new place, which is not friendly and not warm, and you're already feeling uncomfortable because there are things going on in your relationship and in your life, and you're worried about illness, and and it made me really think about like, what are the things that we do, because people don't understand Los Angeles. It's such a complex place. The difference between home, not home, and home. How do you know when you're home for you? What are the things that are the most important for you when you are here? I know some of it is going to be physical, but some of it is that emotional, that emotional landscape too. So how would you, for this region that's so wild and abstract, how would you pin that down in that spare language of yours?
Well, I mean, fundamentally, home is where my spouse is. I mean, it's just, not to be cliche, but it truly is where that's family. And so that's my heart, and that's home. And I think that was part of what was so destabilizing about having to live in separate spaces for a while. And fundamentally that's it. And it's interesting. I mean, during the pandemic, I work from home. I'm lucky that I can do that. And in some ways it's been this odd blessing of, after all that time that we had to spend apart because of circumstance, now here we are both working from home, and we get to have this like focused time together, which has actually been a nice part of all of this horrible situation. But beyond that, community. I mean, it's like, this is, that was what was so hard about leaving Glassell Park, where we were in Northeast LA before, is that there was a real sense of, there's diversity, there's ethnic diversity, there's, a Latino community, there are, folks, I mean, historically that used to be a communist, kind of utopian society on a hill back in the 20s. It's like, it has that kind of history and legacy. Just the proximity to wonderful bookstores, the proximity to, to friends and cafes that we can go and hang out in, and just all of that. It's a very different, to be around people who have similar hopes and dreams, and who are working toward positive change in similar ways. That's what feels like home. And I think, there's some of that where we are now, but we're in a much more conservative neighborhood now that also has a legacy of white supremacy and everything that goes with that. And it's challenging, but this was just an issue of, we had to be here because it's where the clean air was. But that brings up all kinds of things of like, well, what goes with who is allowed to have access to absolutely necessary elements. This is, no one should be denied the opportunity to have clean air. And yet we know that that's not how things work. So but I mean, I miss being near you. I miss being able to go to the Rose Bowl and walk around and be in your area and see the things walking up Lake. I mean, I love that section of Octavia Butler. I mean, you're going to crack up. This is actually right on my desk. Nina gave me this. She proposed to me on the Mount Low, Echo Mountain ruins. And so this was a gift one year, and it's from Mount Low, which is right up Lake. So this is exactly, it's from the old resort. This is the railroad that went up to the resort.
Oh, that's fantastic.
But it's like, I miss that. That's like part of it's part of it's part of our story, and it feels weird to be away from it. So,
because so much of being here, and you do this beautifully about you. I just started making lists. The Texas is just embroidered with flora and fauna. It's like, of the region, we've got spiders, mockingbirds, crows, coyotes, scorpions. That walnut story was really interesting too, with the dog and the walnuts. I mean, we can walk right out into nature, and it's just literally steps away from chain link and concrete, which gives us a sort of a different sort of coexistence, I think, like in this idea of, what it is to be in a place and to connect emotionally to landscape. And I'm just curious for you, like, given that scene at the coffee place where you knew exactly what was going on, and then the wildness of nature right around you, what do you think? I mean, I guess it's like, does natural wild feel more, feel more manageable than what happens with humans, in your experience? Are you more, I guess, emotionally ready to deal with that faster? Which surprises you more? And that's what I think the beauty of this place. We have to be on guard for both,
Oh, it's such an interesting question. I mean, I love nature, absolutely. And I feel like I don't feel a need to control it. If it's more wild than I can deal with, I feel like it's my responsibility to step out. This is nature's space. I'm not here to control it. Right. But people and their like, oh, what was the Baldwin quote? Someone posted it just recently, and of course it's a classic of, we can agree to disagree as long as the ways that we disagree don't basically impose upon my ability to survive and thrive, right?
I was going to say, yes, to be.
I'm paraphrasing. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. To be.
And that's where it gets to be difficult when humanity, I think that's so relevant right now in terms of everything from just neighborhoods and interactions among people, but all the way up to the government. And, there are so many things going on right now that are imposing, that are making it difficult for people to be able to survive and thrive.
Yeah.
I mean, just endless things that we've experienced in these past 7 months are just examples of it. So I personally will prefer being out in the wild and knowing when it's time for me to politely excuse myself and realize I'm out of my depth.
Right.
I prefer that over the hateful stuff that sometimes happens and all the microaggressions like you were talking about.
Yeah.
But that's part of life. And I mean, that's the thing. It's like we have endless like survival strategies for dealing with that. And it's just, but it gets tiring. I mean, it's the whole thing that we're talking about it before we logged on. Like we're all just exhausted right now.
Yeah.
So
and it's so true, because I think about like the things you have to be on guard about, just out in the wild, like where Octavia toward the end of the book, she's talking about, walking up lake into, up to where the mountains are and looking at the view. And she talks about how dangerous, those mountains are. And it's true. And I hear those helicopters going out to rescue people. I know when this is happening because, I'm close enough to, and because people just decided, hey, I just got a coffee at Coffee Bean and Tea Leaf, and I'm going to go hiking in my flip-flops, to Eden Canyon or wherever, to the waterfalls, and then something terrible happens. There's that. And she talks about being scared of nature, but she kept pushing herself into it in all kinds of ways. She kept pushing herself into the unknown in all kinds of ways. But then I also think about, just recently, there's all of this press about Glendale and the legacy of sundown towns. And so you live near one or in one yourself, and how that pops up and how you feel unsafe all of a sudden. And these are other things that, so you're again back to access to the ocean, access to beauty, but also juxtaposed against something that could be very dangerous and frightening and potentially harmful to you, So, I mean, these are the things, it's like, everyone's like, it's like, oh, LA, you're, California, you're from the West, nothing bad will happen to you there. And of course, LA has such a legacy of this as being, for being a minefield of, you don't know what you're going to step into.
Oh, for sure. I mean, you're talking about.
You deal with that very well in this book in a very subtle way. It just pops up. You're in beauty, and then something happens, and you're having to swallow it. And the same thing with Octavia. You know, she's out doing something, and then up pops the devil, as my mom used to say. You know.
Yeah. No, I hear that. I mean, do you think that's what compelled her to write future stories? I mean, how is that connected to the kinds of work that she created? I mean,
she definitely was writing to create landscapes that were inclusive, and mostly to give women power. And they weren't perfect women, you know, that was just it. They were afraid. Like, she was stalked by fear. It was the thing, like, you know, when I'm going through my notes, sometimes I'm trying to find a quote or something, and I'll put the word fear in to see if I can find the quote, and like it pops up so often, I have to, I have to narrow my search, because that's what she had to wrestle with for herself. So that's a component, you know, that's in the book with her characters. You know, it's like they're not sure if they're right, but they're going to move forward, and they're going to move through their fear. So in a way, creating these landscapes, and even with a book like Kindred, which is set in the past, I love this quote of hers. I think about it. She talks about, you know, history can be a planet too. You know, you're going to a place, and you have to, you know, create it, and put people in it, and you have to move them through time and space as a writer. But it gave her room, because, you know, the fantasy part of it is this woman is plucked from contemporary Pasadena, 20th century Pasadena, and pulled back to Maryland, you know, and she's trying to figure out, well, why am I here, and why am I enslaved, and what is going on? And she's fearful, but she works through her fear. And she takes all kinds of risks, you know, in that. So a lot of it was, I think, her working out that, but also really trying to create landscapes, that gave her room, and people who looked like her room. And she left that for us too, you know, as writing prompts, you know, as places to escape to ourselves, ways to dream.
Ways to dream. I love that. Yeah. I love that. Yeah. No, I think that's what it's all about ultimately. It's just being able to accurately acknowledge what's going on around you, but then being able to nourish that humanity, and to not let it destroy you. Right. I mean, I think that's part of what I've been struggling with, and that I tried to work through with this book too, of like, what a wonderful thing to be right near the ocean where we are now. Right. You know, even as much as we miss our old neighborhood, what a wonderful, beautiful thing, and what a privilege to have this wonderful fresh air. And yet at every step, it feels like we are needing to assert our right to be here. Right. And it's like it's a constant thing of asserting that right, but also just maintaining that appreciation, both for the privilege of being able to have this opportunity to move. So many folks that I know who are in neighborhoods that aren't healthy for them can't, you know, it's not an option. I grew up right across from the tracks in Orange with factories all around us, and my family's still there. You know, my family has been there for the past 100 years in the same house. My grandma lives in a house that's right across the street from the segregated Mexican school that is now a sun-kissed. Actually, no, I'm sorry, Chapman University now owns it. But, you know, it's like gone through, it's all these ways that sometimes folks can't leave where they are. So I appreciate being able to be in this place that's healthier for us. And yet, you know, there's a neighbor down the way who has a Confederate flag on display in the garage that he leaves lit up so everyone can see it when they drive by and when they walk by. So it's this, I understand that whole thing of needing to observe everything about the world and and also focus on the positive, but also trying to imagine a different possibility.
Right. To create some space for yourself and a landscape that it's not simple because it's not like I was talking to somebody because during the heat waves and the fires, and as you know, because you guys checked in on me, I was in the evacuation zone for quite a while, and I am reading Parable of the Talents, which is was not it's not escapism. I was you're deep in it, you're deep in it, and but what you see is a possibility. We go back to your theme of community and why community is important. The protagonist, that's what she's trying to build, community, and we have to be able to have people we can rely on, and trust is really important. And that is one of the things, again, as we move through your spaces through the freeway and the city, and I think about all of the different Los Angeleses there are, and the bounty that is there, and what privilege can buy you, yes, but also what you can get back to what I was saying in the beginning about Octavia being very focused on, okay, I really don't have X, Y, Z, I don't have access to this or that, but what do I have, and for her, and you see it in the books, I think growing up in an environment where she was, the school was segregated, really, she, but there were Latino kids, Asian kids, and she took Spanish classes, and it's in her journals. She writes in Spanish, and that's reflected in the novels. Too, where you see, the diversity of her characters. So we have the gift and bounty of that. So she was trying to find it then, and it stayed with her again, back to that looking, and the things that, matter to her about sense of place and landscape, and those emotional territories that she went through herself.
Your book, I'm so grateful for it. It was seriously, it's incredibly inspiring. It gave me hope for a writer's life, and
thank you
for the magic of to know the impact that she had with her work, and as a reader to just get a better sense of the person who created stories that have been so impactful. It was just, it on so many levels, I was just profoundly moved by your book. It was
Thank you.
And on top of it, Lynell, your use of language, your writing, is, the subject matter, yes, fantastic, beautiful, I love it, of course, but your writing is just transcendent. It's so incredibly, it was such a pleasure to sit with it and to just be with your voice, especially. I think I miss you extra much since we are getting to hang out in person. So it was an extra treat, but I know that that would be the experience for everyone. It's just such a beautifully written book.
Thank you.
Profoundly beautiful.
Thank you very much. It was, I think that starting the writing, the hardest thing, and I thought, I have to figure out a way to merge us. And we're different writers, we're just completely different writers. And I wanted to take a back seat to her, but I also realized, no, you can't. You have to create structure for this. You are taking people through her worlds, and using these objects that she needed. So how are you going to do this? And finally, what I ended up doing was, when I thought about that, I was I first started writing, in my own voice, but scenes, not an essay, just scenes, and imagining her waiting for the bus with the notebook here, imagining her on the blacktop, not being able to walk on the other side of this unlocked fence, what it was it like for her to, because she was like, I hate being here at school, but if I leave and I could walk out, where would I go? So I started doing that, and then I could hear her voice, and then I could thought, this is maybe a way to do it. But it was, yeah. So thank you. So hearing that means a lot, because that's the thing I wanted to showcase her. I just kind of wanted to create like a place for her to sit and talk, a stage, and but I wanted to pull the reader in too. So, but without being, without disturbing, her, and she's the star.
It's a beautiful book. It's really, and it's powerful, and it's such an amazing contribution. I loved reading it.
Thank you.
Really loved it.
Thank you. Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you. Thank you for writing it. We're all lucky you wrote it.
Did it?
No, it's an amazing book. Yeah. Oh, I'm so glad we got to get together and talk. And,
I am too. I'm looking forward to being able to talk to you more about this when we're not on camera, because I have so many thoughts just about, and I don't know, I want people to see. I don't think you'll be able to, because but I love the way it's set up on the page, because it's and again, back to pieces, like these, it's pieces you put together. And I think I wrote you right after I read it the first time, and I said, for all of its spareness, the richness, there's such richness. And again, it's like these seeds that got planted inside me. So I look and see things differently. And again, like I said, so as I'm listening to the radio reports about, the region and the weather, yeah, I'm hearing echoes of you and about the environment we're in, and back to what you said about what we have access to, based on class, and how we make the best of knowing that. And it's, yeah. And the things that we don't think about until we're sometimes in that moment, as you said, where, oh wait, my life is going to fall apart over something that we have no control. Back to the control. We have no control over that. No control. So how do we fix this? How do we shift that narrative?
Yeah. And I guess, I think part of the control is what we've been experiencing this last week. Just on a very pragmatic level.
Yeah.
Like, the one thing that we can do is we vote and we choose who is in office, and we advocate for change, and we make sure that things, in the area where I am right now, Bruce's Beach used to be a segregated beach.
That's
and
right.
We make sure that kind of stuff doesn't continue into the future.
Right.
And we make sure that environmental protections are not dismantled the way that they're being dismantled right now. Right. And we make sure that things like excise plant don't continue to happen in neighborhoods of communities of color. And, so we have control, but wow, it's a lot of work, and it's going to take a lot of folks getting together to focus on making it happen.
Yeah.
To imagine that new landscape, that shifted landscape.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Exactly. What do we want? What do we need? And how do we make it happen? And that's the thing. It's like, the work always happens on the ground. And that was one of the reasons, like, I was really interested in journalism too, is that you realize, like, you see this layer politically, and, and it is voting the right people in and that, but the work really does happen, on the ground, with community organizing and community involvement, and really owning the place that you live in, and being a participant, and understanding it, and not just closing your door and going, it really is being involved. And that's what, again, makes community. And that's how you can not feel so helpless.
Yeah. Yeah. And I'm the kid of a big old hippie on my dad's side. So it's also love.
Yeah, it's love.
Right?
And
That changes
Octavia
a
would
lot of
say,
things.
yes, it's love, change, God is change and community is love. And we work together to build something better. We don't like this, well, where does our community take root then? So let's figure that out.
Yeah. Amen. Let's just do this tomorrow again.
Okay.
I'll meet you here again.
Yes, okay. All right. I'll be here. I probably will be sitting. I don't go very far anymore.
Oh man, I'm looking over at the chats, but I don't. Sam, are you out there? I don't remember if we were going to touch base again
here. And yeah, everyone's been so quiet.
I know, it's very quiet.
Yeah, usually the chat is going, but it changes all the time. So it has been an hour. If you guys want to cut it, I put 2 questions because we didn't have any, but we don't have to. Do you want to do them?
Up to you, Lynell. What do you think?
It's up to you. What do you think? Sure. It's up to you. It's your night.
Sam, are there questions that you?
They're mine, and we don't have to do them. I just put them in case you guys talk the whole time. So, which is great.
We'll just keep talking if anyone wants to hang out. I'll go get some wine. I'll be right back.
I was just curious how you both connected to nature, because you were talking so much about it and the environment and how we interact with it. And I thought that was really interesting. So I was just wondering how nature, let me actually read it because I just forgot, how you both connected with nature while you were writing and creating these books and how it impacted you while you were in the process.
That's a good question.
Do
you want to go first, Felicia, or do you?
Oh gosh, I mean, nature is it's a part of my everyday life, really. As much as I can have it be a part of my everyday life, it is. I mean, there was just this incredible, I don't know what the sunset was like in other parts of town tonight, but Nina told me you have to come and see this immediately. And I really did. It was fuchsia colored. And for once, I don't think it was from smoke or pollution or any residue in there. It was just an amazing sunset. But that, my family, I have agricultural roots on one side that my family came over from Mexico to work in the fields picking oranges. So I'm, indigenous, that I grew up being told that the moon was named for me, which is ridiculous. But I think it creates, it fosters a certain relationship with nature, so it's an everyday part of my life. And, I hope that in some ways I was able to honor some of that in what I wrote, and just kind of, it's religion for me, the flowers and the sunsets and the moon and all of that. So yeah. And it gives me power and fuels me for sure. How about you, Lynell?
I've always been, it's funny, I was thinking about I'm absolutely an urban person, and there's one quote in there where Octavia talks about the same thing, it's like going, yeah, we are the same. But I love being outside and trying to create some sort of ritual. So for years now, 20 plus years, until we had the lockdown, I meet a group of people at very early in the morning, like 6:30, 6:45 on Saturday. In Griffith Park, and we hike and jog those trails up there, and COVID was the only thing that has broken that, and so I have felt very weird, we don't do that anymore. I'm lucky now to be in a place where I can walk out my door and be up on a trail pretty quickly, and there are trails around, the Arroyo, and there's something about, for me as a writer, the sense and the fauna and the flora, and learning more, and about what I'm around, because it's like I was just like, oh yeah, I recognize that, but being in it, smelling it, hearing its crunch, as a writer, it it is so helpful to be able to write about sense of place in that way, and to live in a place like this where you have so much around, and you can be up in the mountains or go to the beach, and you can have those, well, you used to be able to have those, you could have both of those experiences in one day until the traffic changed. You can't, but you can more now. I loved that. I knew that was special, and the fact that I was from that, and then in writing this particular book, in looking at Octavia's journals, I could see where she went, and I live in her old neighborhood by chance, so I would try to like recreate some walk that she made, or
That's so cool.
Yeah,
that is so cool. Well, both of those answers were wonderful. I feel the same. I didn't grow up the same way with nature being communicated to me that way, Felicia, where it was this amazing thing, you know. Obviously my background is different and people didn't think about that stuff. But as I've gotten older, I feel so much more connected to it. I don't know if I'm also a writer, and it's always like I've been writing poetry my whole life, and like eventually all my poetry was so nature focused in all kinds of ways. So I feel the same about it, and I think it's so beautiful. So thank you for those beautiful.
Thank you for asking that.
Yeah, of course.
Thank you.
My next question, I was just curious because you're talking so much about people and community and diversity and all the different experiences in LA. So I don't know if this question makes sense, but I was curious if either of you had any major observations you've made in the way Angelenos or tourists or all the various communities engage with their worlds and that nature that you've observed, and how they might have impacted your books if they did, since you're both from here, I think, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
I mean, and how what's the difference between the way people from other places interact with nature here versus how we do? Or
I guess just if you've ever observed the ways, like anyone that's in LA, because LA has so many different kinds of people, whether they're from here or not from here,
right.
You know, class, race, gender, everything. If you've ever noticed, if any of those things stood out to you a lot while you were writing these books, or, I mean, Lynell, you're with Octavia, I'm sure a lot of that came up. You might have already covered that, but it just came into my mind.
I'm trying to think. It's an interesting way to think about it. I know that when, for example, when I used to work in downtown LA, and when I was at the Times, and we would see tourists on the street, and we could always tell, like, okay, that's the German tourist, because they were dressed in a particular way, and they were willing to walk anywhere. I would tell them, oh no, that's too far. Oh no, you know, we're gonna go, and they wanted to go to Griffith Park, and actually, it was. And I said, well, you know, Elysian Park is closer, and if you really are gonna want to walk, because you want to have both urban and wild in your one walk, you could do that. And that's the kind of beauty of LA. Is like, yeah, just so I sent them, you know, to Echo Park, and then or toward Echo Park, and then they went up into nature. But I guess what I realized in that is that you see there are some people who are just absolutely fearless about going through both kinds of terrain. Back to what I was asking you, Felicia, earlier about moving through both. You know, like the urban doesn't bother them, the nature doesn't bother them. They're two separate stories that eventually cross, and you learn about a place by being open to both of them. So that's what that's I can think about, but I can't think about anything that came up in writing this book, because it was mostly with her. I was so focused on her. You know?
I saw that she passed away in Washington. She lived in Washington.
Yeah.
So it's interesting that you said she was afraid of nature, because I feel like Washington is definitely more nature focused than, absolutely.
Yeah. The one thing I saw very early in journals, where she really wanted to live in a place that was green. I mean, she loved, you know, big trees, and she, you know, loved the I think that's why, I mean, she talks about in Parable of the Talents, even she talks about, you know, the redwoods in Altadena and that smell of pine, and she wanted to be around that, so she was open to that. So I guess by then it was like, okay, you know, like
Yeah.
she loved animals, and there's one of my favorite photographs of her is her standing with this horse, and she has the most radiant smile. If you Google Octavia Butler horse, and you'll see green, and her in a pasture with her arm around this horse. It's, you know, it's beautiful. It's just gorgeous.
That's awesome.
In her joy.
I love what you said though about, you know, that you learn a place by being open to experiencing both. And I think that's so true. And I think that, you know, sometimes it's about what public space is. And so nature, I mean, there are so many Latinos who will make wonderful use of parks and hikes, and you know, the hike that you referred to, you know, if you continue up lake, like there's a wonderful diversity of people who are there. Absolutely. And it's like, because it is, thank goodness at this point, open to everyone. Right. You know, this is public space that you can enjoy, and it offers a certain kind of balance to a more urban space. So yeah, I don't know. I like how you said it, Lynell. I think that's exactly right. I mean, especially with a place like Los Angeles, you really learn it differently. You know it differently when you stay open to both of those, to both of the different experiences, and when you have access to them.
Right.
So
exactly.
I mean, it goes back to that too. Yeah.
Very true. It's very true. Yeah.
Thank you, Sam.
Oh yeah, thank you both so much. And we don't have any other questions.
Everyone's shy or watching.
Yeah, but they said thank you.
The results.
Yeah. Thank you, everyone, for being here.
Yeah, thank you.
Because there's nothing else going on in the world right now. So thank you so much.
It's so boring. It's so boring out there.
Let's hope for some boringness soon.
Yeah.
Yeah. We're all hoping for some news that might shift things in some major ways pretty soon here. So fingers crossed.
Yep.
I hope so.
Well, thank you both so much. This was a wonderful conversation. Everyone, please purchase their books. You can do it at the green button. Amazing. Thank you both so much for being with us. It's such a great night.
Thank you for having us. I really appreciate it again. Thank you.
And thank
Likewise.
you for watching.
Oh, thank you, Lynell, and thank you, Booksoup, and thank you everyone for being here. It was such a pleasure. Thank you. Thank you, Sam.
So much.
Everyone have a wonderful night.
Yes.
Bye.
Bye.